and welcome to Cuppa with a Scientist, a podcast by Loughborough University that will interview a different scientist each episode about their academic journey to the top. We will discuss how they went from a confused teenager choosing A-level and early years subjects to a leader in their field, with plenty of weird and wonderful stories in between and golden nuggets of advice for those looking to get into science. As well as keeping your ears and brain entertained, we hope this podcast will dispel the myth that all scientists wear white lab coats and give you an insight into how vast the world of science really is. And because the makers of this show are painfully British, we'll be doing it all over a good cuppa. But before we get started, a quick bit about your host. I'm Meg, and I'm the PR and Communications Officer at Loughborough University, and I'm also an aspiring scientist. I made the decision to return to university last year and pursue my love of biology, and I found podcasts to be an incredibly helpful resource when making that decision, though slightly field specific. From health sciences to social sciences, we'll cover it all in this podcast and show you how vast science really is. And hopefully you'll pick up a few tips and tricks along the way to help you on your journey to becoming a scientist. So stick the kettle on and settle in. Joining us for today's episode is Professor James Goodwin, an expert in the physiology of ageing and a visiting professor in the School of Design and Creative Arts. James is the former chief scientist at Age UK and an inspirational speaker, talking regularly in the UK, Europe, Canada and US. He has appeared on a range of broadcast media, been a member of numerous expert bodies, including the UN's Research Agenda for Ageing, and he's just published his first book, titled Supercharge Your Brain with Bantam Press. But more on all of that later. So hi James, welcome to the show. First of all, important question, what mug have you gone for and what are you drinking today?
Well, I'll show you. This mug, if I can put it to the camera, is a souvenir from New Hampshire where my son lives. And if you don't know New Hampshire, top right-hand corner of the United States, it's a wilderness and a natural paradise. And what the mug shows is the common loon, which is a massive duck, not quite the size of a goose, but it's a massive bird. And my first experience of it was floating out to fish on the middle of a lake, covered in early morning mist in the summer, and hearing this haunting and evocative mating cry of the loon, enough to raise the hairs on the back of your neck. It was so enigmatic, it was just wonderful. So I had to have the mug. And if you haven't heard that, put on YouTube The Call of the Common Loon. It will just, nothing like it in the British Isles. And maybe Europe, but I don't know, but North America. Anyway, that's my mug. And what's he got in it? Colombian coffee.
Lovely, excellent mug, and yeah, I'll definitely check that out. Because I know you're a dog fan, I've gone for dogs because humans are the worst, with a selection of dog illustrations.
Yeah, my daughter's got a great little tag which says, humans tolerated, dogs welcome.
I like that, that's my life motto. And we've also requested that you bring an artefact with you that relates to your work. Could you show us what you've got today, please?
I will. There it is.
Okay. Cap. Yeah.
And it says, if you can see on there, CIROC, and this, which stands for Small Arms Instructor Range Officers Course. It's typically American. And this was given to me by a United States Army General in recognition of our shared love of competition shooting. So when I was in the Army, I was pretty good at putting holes in targets. And I shot for the one of the Army's international shooting teams. I was a dab hand at pistol.
Oh, okay.
I can put a hole in a playing card from 50 yards.
Wow, okay, that's a talent.
Yeah, it would take me maybe 2 or 3 goes, but I could certainly do it. And I did well. One of the things that made me feel better about being at Loughborough, which is the home of academic sports prowess in the world, number one in the world, was the fact that I'd got gold, silver and bronze medals at national shooting competitions.
Oh, fantastic.
So that made me feel a successful competitor.
I mean, I've got nothing to show when I'm at Loughborough.
Well, you know, I mean, people would say, you know, athletics, football, cricket or whatever. Yeah, I used to play all that stuff, but I actually did well at the old military pistol shooting.
Fantastic. That's a really interesting little fact to kick off the show with.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. We'll talk more about we'll get into your army career and everything like that a little bit later on. But first, you're an expert in the physiology of aging. Could you explain what that means, please?
Yeah, physiology is the study of how the body systems work. It's fundamentally important to medicine and all health professions. So without it, the modern practice of medicine and health would be rudimentary. It would be in the wilderness somewhere. You'd be back in the days of the Greeks and the Romans, who knew very little physiology. And I have to say that I found it conceptually very difficult. So people might think professor, high flyer, intellectual genius and all this stuff. I had to really work hard at it. Some of it was just astoundingly difficult. So for the encouragement of all those who think I'll fail at the first hurdle because I can't work out E = MC squared, you can if you try. You can if you try. And I did, and here we are. And physiology of aging, well, the body systems change with time, right across our lives, from the moment we conceive till the moment we die. And those changes are fundamentally important to solving health problems across our lives. So whether you're in childhood or middle age, young adults or middle age, and then older age, you need to know what's going on in the body, because the treatment for 11-year-old, I guess, will not be the same treatment for somebody who's 71. And therefore, you need to understand this physiology of aging. That's what that's all about.
You've just answered my second question there. Why is it important? So,
well, to add to that, no, that deserves a different answer. Population aging is one of the great successes of the 20th and 21st century. When I was a child, most people retired at 60 or 65, and then 5 years later, they were dead. That might sound shocking to people. That's the facts of the matter. And now there are 10 million people in Britain who are going to live to be 100. And many people live to their 80s and many more into their 90s. I would say within 2 decades, most people will expect to look forward to be 100. And that brings with it its own questions and its own answers. Does your health necessarily decline as you get older? Is it inevitable? Or can we do something about it? Or can we maintain our health right until our last days? And if we get sick when we're older, how do we solve those problems? And what's the economic and healthcare implications for society? An aging population is a brilliant success, but it brings with it special questions which need to be answered. Physiology of aging has got a lot of those questions. I can give you an example if you want.
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, COVID is one. So we know that mortality from COVID is age-related. So the older you are, the more you are at risk of dying from it. Okay, that's one. That's one example. Another example would be every winter in Britain, between 20 and 50,000 people die from the effects of cold, not flu. Flu's, you add those up as well.
Yeah. But
they die from cold. So winter deaths from cold and actually summer deaths from heat are higher in the older population. It's a population public health issue, and therefore we need to know what to do about it. Loughborough provided me with the skills to think about those questions, and I'm immensely grateful.
So when you say you're at a dinner party and you say what your title is and what your role is, are there any common misconceptions? Do people think you've got the answer to, eternal youth?
Well, once they've gone over the fact that I'm a boffin, if you know that word, the guy with the white lab coat on and holding the rat with the bow tie and a bald head and all the rest. Once they've got over that, they do get curious, and I try and bring it back every time to their own lives. What are the kind of questions you've got as you face the next 10, 20, 30, 40, even 50 years? Now, when I was 30, 65 was ancient. When I got to 60, I began to realize that life's short and time whizzes by. Enjoy yourself when you're young, but don't neglect the future, because the future is what you'll be. And that's where people get interested, because I can start to tell them the story of their life going forward. Oh, I hope I can.
That's really interesting, and I'm sure you're a great dinner party guest from the sounds of it. So we'll discuss more about your research, the applications of it, a little bit later on. But let's first take it back a little bit. So I can't imagine when you were younger you wanted to be a leader in the physiology of aging. Correct me if I'm wrong. But what did you want to do when you were younger?
All I wanted to do was to join the army, and if I could, become an army officer. People said, why would you want to do that? Well, first of all, because the British Army is very special. All your youngsters out there are looking. It ain't Rambo, and it ain't Hollywood. The kind of people who make up the British Army are your brothers, your sisters, your uncles, your aunts, ordinary people from all walks of life. The British Army is a reflection of British society. Right? And we're not this mean, lean killing machine that Hollywood makes armies out to be. The British have never done that. We've never hated our enemies, ever. And Bernard Montgomery, a famous field marshal from the last war, said, the British soldier makes a great fighter, but a very poor hater. We do not hate our enemies. We have to deal with enemies, but we deal with it in a very British way, I have to tell you. Now, why did I want to be an army officer? Because I was brought up by the wartime generation. And these ordinary working class people around me, unassuming, modest, humble people who you'd walk by in the street now, those that are left, like Captain Sir Tom, right? People like him. And my father spent 5 years of his life away from his sweetheart, all around the world. She had no idea where he was. He went through immense danger, got through it all and came back. He's my father. My uncle was an Arctic convoy hero. What's the Arctic convoy? Only in the winter months, because in the summer it was 24 hours of daylight and you could be shot and sunk without let nor hindrance. Right. In the winter months, convoys left Scotland loaded with fuel, ammunition, ordnance, armoured vehicles, radios, everything that the Russians needed to beat the Germans in the war. And it was suicide alley. People were torpedoed and fell into freezing water and died within 2 minutes. And my uncle saw that. He saw the ships either side of him going down and his own ship on fire and all the rest of it. He was 17. So those are the people I wish I saw. And they didn't think they did anything special. They were full of duty, selfless, and they understood the value of cohesion, being together as a community. That's why.
So how long were you in the army for, and when did you make this decision to return to higher education?
Regular service was 5 years, and I could have served, I've forgotten how many it was now, but I was on what they call a short service contract, short service commission. And I applied for a full commission, which is employment guaranteed until you're 55. But the army was downsizing. Ever since I joined, all it's done is, it's the smallest now it's ever been in 300 years. It's appalling. If ever it came to it. I mean, people say, oh, we need all these special forces and so on. Where do you think they come from? They come from the infantry. And the infantry's now that big. You're not going to be able to support that. Anyway, the army was downsizing, and I thought either the army throws me out when it's ready or I go when I'm ready. So I thought I'll have a look around. And I thought I'll retrain, I'll do a master's degree. I didn't do very well first time round. And I know if I left the army anyway, my degree's not going to be, I haven't got a very good ticket. You know, a third class ticket or second class ticket. I've got first class ticket. So I thought I want a better train ride than this. So I looked around and I tried a master's degree at Durham. It was biotechnology. The biotechnology as an area was not right for me. And the university was not right for me. I won't say any more. So one weekend, I stayed over, and then on the Monday, came into Loughborough and saw a fabulous guy called Ernest Hamley, who ran the MSc in human biology.
So you did your masters at Loughborough. How did you find it? Because technically, I guess, did you return as what they class as a mature student?
Yeah, and I did a master's degree in a class of 4 people, and 2 men and 2 women, right? The 4 was I think one of the reasons why Ernest Hamley wanted me on the course was because technically you had to have a minimum of 4 people before they'd allow them to run the course. And I was number 4. So I think that was probably one of the reasons. He also liked me, and I think if you want to get on in life, it's very important that people like you. Don't go out of your way to be, sycophantic, rubbing up against people. No, do that, but just relax with people. And if they like you, that's always a good way. So Ernest liked me, and he put me onto this course. The other guy in the course was an RAF officer. So that was brilliant.
Right. Yeah.
Right? I mean, oh yeah. I mean, the RAF and the Army always, knock lumps out of each other anyway. They hate them and we hate us. Sorry, I mean that's it. We hate them and they hate us.
Got you.
Yeah. So there was this, but I mean, he was a fundamentally great guy. He was a fast jet pilot in the RAF. Got a cold and it perforated his eardrum, so they took him off flying.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so unlucky.
Yeah. And so he joined the sports division. He became a physical education officer in the RAF. And they said, you've got to do a master's degree. So they sent him to Loughborough.
Okay. So how did you find it being a master's student with a bit of life experience? Do you think that helped? Because same as me, I'm a mature student doing another degree. And I think having a bit of a life experience is serving me pretty well.
Yeah. I did far better as a result of this. I came top of my year and I got an A on every assignment I was ever given. Every single one. And there were lots. Loughborough is a very rigorous university. It's very cool. It's very laid back, but it's also very rigorous. And it was test, no end of them. And I got A's in every single one, including the 3 unseen written exams at the end of the master's degree and in my thesis. In fact, I got the best grade on the thesis.
Wow.
So, and that was because the Army had taught me a number of things. It had taught me how to get on with people, how to spot opportunities, how to look ahead and stop it going wrong before it went wrong. Don't be a prat. Get on with, don't be a prat. Get on with other people and help others. Absolutely critical lessons I'd learned from the Army, and they made me a wiser, better, more reliable and a stronger person. I never got freaked out with nerves. Knowing I got to go on a patrol and capture some, Russian soldiers who where they shouldn't be, how's that for nerves? How's that for nerves? Then, Loughborough are going to give you an unseen written exam. Okay, bring it on.
It's nothing. Walk in the park.
Yeah, bring it on. So yes, you're right. Being mature really did help. The other 2, one was an Iranian woman who was not living in Iran because, you know what, I don't need to tell your listeners and viewers what Iran is like. Don't go there, right? So she was studying here because of that, and she was the youngest in the group. And then there was one other she'd worked, it's a long time ago now. I think Jill was, Ashraf was straight from her first degree. And Jill was, I think she'd been a nurse. So we all had some kind of a background, and we all gelled really well, and that was the great thing.
So after you knocked out of the park with your masters, did you decide to do a PhD? Where did you do your PhD at?
Well, Ernest said to me, James, because you did well on your thesis, you've now got the dubious pleasure of going to a learned society and presenting it, 20-minute, half an hour presentation. No, that did freak me out. You know, here's this new academic me standing in front of a real audience of indisputably the best experts in their field. And my knees were knocking when I went up to give that. That was really outside my comfort zone. But sitting in the front was Professor McCants in his 80s in a wheelchair. Now, people will say, who's he? Who's Professor McCants? Every time you go shopping in Sainsbury's or Tesco or Morrison's or wherever you go, have a look at the food pack, and on the bottom it will tell you recommended daily allowances, vitamin A, B, C, D, E, and all the rest of it, right? Professor McCants was the guy who worked out what the theory behind a recommended dietary allowance.
Wow.
RDA.
That's
he was
very
sitting,
cool.
He was sitting, and the person next to him was a guy called Ken Collins. Ken was a scientist who wanted to become an independent scientist and attract grants from funding bodies in order to do his research, and realized that you'd have more success if you were a doctor than if you were a scientist, or if you were both, you cracked it. So he got his doctor's degree, his PhD from Oxford, and then got his MD on top of that. So he was a doctor and a scientist, and he was one of Europe's leading experts on cold weather and older people, which is what I talked about earlier. And I gave this presentation. Then afterwards, he said to me, James, he said, you finished your master's degree. What are you doing now? I said, no idea. I haven't got a plan. As ever. And he said, I've just been given a grant by the Medical Research Council. You want to come and work on it over a period of a year? He said, I need a research assistant. How about that? That's all about working hard, doing well, and putting yourself in the right place when opportunity comes along. If you sit at home reading books and on your computer or on this, right, you'll never pick up the opportunities you do as if you mix with people. That's why COVID has been so awful. It stopped this flux of going places and meeting people. Well, I was in that place because I made my mind up to do well, and I succeeded, and I put myself where the opportunity was. Right? All your listeners or viewers, that's the big secret. That's how to do it. So I agreed, and I spent a year on and off down at the Institute of Naval Medicine. Again, a familiar environment, Royal Navy, love the Royal Navy. The Army and the Royal Navy love each other, right? And I was at home there. And they knew I'd been an Army officer. So, you know, I was one of the tribe in a way, not quite good enough as I wasn't a Royal Navy officer, but I was nearly there. And so I got on well. I was able to make it run smoothly for Ken. He was conducting all the experiments, everything else. And he said, James, he said, you've got two things going for you. He said, you can make things work and you're clever. So he said, why don't you do a PhD? So I looked around, and the one place that accepted me was the University of Exeter, where I am now in the southwest, in Devon. And I spent my time there doing a PhD. And it was a part-time PhD, and the other half of my time was spent teaching in the School of Health, which taught physiotherapists, occupational therapists, and so on. They needed some physiology. So that was a really good deal. And also, at the same time, I joined the Army Reserve.
Okay, we're back.
And that led to 20 years of part-time soldiering, which was brilliant. I can't tell you. And a lot of it, I was an officer in the OTC of the university. All universities in Britain have an officer training corps. So anybody watching this who's about to go to university will go to university. If you want a bit of fun for 3 years, and there's no obligation to join the army, they'll put you in helicopters, they'll throw you out of airplanes with a parachute on, they'll teach you to shoot, they'll take you abroad, they'll learn you to navigate, they'll put you on survival weekends, they'll make you march straight, you'll have the best parties ever in your life during the OTC. Advert over.
Yeah, I was about to say, fabulous. I want to be chucked out of a plane with the parachute.
Yeah.
So you're at Exeter. How long did you stay at Exeter for? And then how did you end up where we are today? How have we gone from Exeter?
Yeah, it took me 5 years to do my PhD, because it was slightly longer. It was, and then it took a year for the examiner to examine my PhD. Which I look back on it now, and it's probably scandalous in a way that it took that long. But my external examiner is now a friend of mine and a colleague. Right? My supervisor said, write down 5 people who you want to examine your PhD. So I thought about who I should write down. And I wrote down 4, and then on the 5th one, anybody except this person. Guess what he did?
Oops.
He got that person to examine me.
Wow.
Yeah. He still comes to Loughborough to examine PhD students in George Havenard's Ergonomic and Environmental Research Centre. So, but he gave me, first of all, he didn't read it until 6 months in, till the last, they're given 6 months. I got it back almost the last day of that first 6 months. And it said, a number of things need doing this, and we'll have your viva on this date. So I went on to the viva. It was 5 hours long. That's unheard of. 5 hours. 5 hours. He questioned me on every crossed T and dotted I. And then afterwards, when I got my PhD, and I said to him, why did you do that? He said, I wanted you to know that you'd gone through the most rigorous test, and it was a quality, it was a quality performance. So I thought, well, it didn't seem like that at the time. And then it took me, he gave me a lot of alterations, some of which I didn't agree with. Neither did the internal examiner. But the external examiner, whose name was Neil Armstrong, not the astronaut, not the astronaut, he's now Pro Vice Chancellor, or one of them at Exeter. He said to me, James, he said, your examiner's in the driving seat. So if he tells you to write this in Swahili, you go write it in Swahili. Because if you don't, he said, we've got no option but to fail you. And he then told me about a PhD candidate who was given 20 alterations to make, had it back inside a few days, and had only done half of them. He just flipped it in and thought, I've had enough, I'll just let it. Said I had to write him a letter saying, you failed yourself.
Yeah.
You've given us no option. We can't pass you. We told you to do that. So he said to me, get your head down and do them. And I did them immaculately, to the point of torture, and finished them and handed it in 3 months later. And then he took another 3 months to get that back to me. And in the end, Neil Armstrong knocked on the door of this house in which I'm sitting now on Christmas Eve and said, the Senate isn't due to rubber stamp your PhD thesis until the 8th of January. He said, I can't let you go through Christmas without knowing, James. So he said, quite unofficially, I've come here to tell you passed.
Oh, what a lovely Christmas present.
Yeah. And my father was standing next to me because he'd come down for Christmas, my father and my mother. Nearly cried.
Oh, that's lovely. A long time, but, nothing worth having comes easy.
Yeah, that's right. Life is never easy. Never. It's never easy.
What happened once you became Dr. Goodwin? Did you stay at Exeter, or did you?
I did. I stayed there, but not for much longer, because now I'd got my first class rail ticket.
Yeah.
And I went up to Teesside University and taught there, and Newcastle University at the James Cook University Hospital. That was Newcastle Medical School, where I did some research. And then I was because I was researching into the physiology of older people in cold temperatures in the winter. That was my area of research. For the first time ever, the Met Office, that's the British Weather Service, for those who aren't familiar with the Met Office, they do all the weather forecasts. They're responsible for the one half of the world, and the Americans are responsible for the other in terms of weather forecasting. And it's here in Exeter, the Met Office is in Exeter. They held their first ever conference on weather and health. And so, I mean, I turned up at this. And I got asked by somebody from a charity called Help the Aged, who were there for this conference, and said, we're recruiting our first ever head of research. Why don't you think about it? So I had a look at it, and the more I looked at it, the more I wanted it. I was going to be given money for a start. Instead of having to apply for money in research, I was going to be given between £3 and £5 million a year to spend on research. Fabulous. And I'd be mixing with non-scientists, communicating valuable ideas in such a way that they understood them and that it produced a benefit for their health and their well-being and their quality of life. So I joined Help the Aged as the first head of research. That's how I left the academic world as a researcher and went into the world of research impact and knowledge translation. That's what you call it. Oh, I love this. On my first day, I walked into the chief executive's office. His name was Michael Lake. And I checked him out, and he'd been an army officer, but a very senior one. And they'd appointed him to be the chief executive because senior army officers are very rounded people. They're very competent, mature, sagacious, wise people. So there he was in his office. And he said to me, James, he said, I've just read your CV. He said, you've got an army background. And I said, yeah, small one. And he said, who do you know in the Royal Logistic Corps, which is where he served? And I said, the bursar, that's the administrator of the local school, Exeter School, is Derek Williams. And I know that he was in the RLC. And he did that. And he said, Derek Williams was my best friend in the army for 30 years.
Wow, what a small world.
And after that, I could do no wrong.
Yeah.
It was astonishing, and I had to manage my boss. I was the head of research. I had a director to answer to, but Mike used to come straight to me all the time. So I had to make sure that I got on really well with my direct boss, my director, because you imagine that. I mean, that doesn't go down very well. But I managed it, and that's when I learned my second biggest skill on top of the science I know, which was how to make the science work.
So you eventually went on to work at Age UK. How did that come about?
Well, I spent 6 years at Help the Aged, and there was another big charity dealing with ageing called Age Concern, and they both had the same patron, who was Prince Charles, who, by the way, is not how he comes across on the media or how the media portray him. Prince Charles is fabulous guy for me. I mean, I've met him on a number of occasions, and on every occasion, you know, he's impressed me. There's never been a time when I've thought just another royal. No.
Okay.
So his father impressed me even more, Prince Philip. I'll tell you about that. So I was in Help the Aged and Age Concern, and they decided to merge because they had the same patron, Prince Charles. And he said, why are the two of you doing the same thing? Why don't you become one? So they merged and became Age UK.
Oh, right. Got you. Okay.
I'm just going sideways for a moment, because this relates to brain health, in which I'm interested. Brain health is a problem as you age, or can be a problem as you age. So we spent a large amount of money funding a big project in Edinburgh University called The Disconnected Mind. It's all about how to maintain your brain from when you're 15 to when you're 95 or older. That's what the project was about. Absolutely astonishing. Edinburgh University. We held a competition amongst the universities so we could decide on who to give the money. And this is another lesson for all the people listening to this. You couldn't put a cigarette paper between the two universities. One was Edinburgh University, the other one was University College London. On scientific terms, they were both fabulous projects. But we decided on Edinburgh. Do you know why?
No.
the interviews were held in London, and University College was like one bus ride away.
Mm.
So their research team, I think it was turned up, were 4 of them. Edinburgh, it's a couple of 100 miles away, 300 miles away.
Mm.
They sent their vice-chancellor.
Oh, okay. They're going in hard there.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. He came and he said, not only is this team going to present you with a fabulous opportunity, I want you to know that every other faculty around it is supporting them. The administration of the university is supporting them. The president of the university is supporting it. You've got this university's 100% support behind this project. And I thought to myself, these people know how to do this. Mm. They've sent their best guy. He'd probably got 100 more important reasons or places where he should be, right? Instead of coming all the way down to London to sit in front of us for 10 minutes, but he got it. He knew how important personal relationships were. University College London, absolutely stone cold, sober, scientific, look you in the eye presentation, lacked the warmth and the empathy and the humanity of Edinburgh. That's why they got it. Another great lesson.
Yeah, it is a good lesson. You know, it never undervalue the importance of speaking face to face.
Yeah, exactly.
So that project sounds really interesting. Can you kind of reveal what came off the back of it, or what any of the findings were?
The study?
Yes, it sounds interesting.
Astonishing. In the year 2000, Ian Deary and Lawrence Whalley, both psychiatrists, one as psychologists as well, were foraging about in the basement of the School of Education at Edinburgh University, Moray House School of Education. And they came across some old boxes and decided to have a look in there. Oh my God, a 50-year-old treasure trove. In 1947, Scotland decided to measure the IQ, the intelligence of every child in Scotland on the same day.
Wow.
And in June the 12th, I think it was, 1947, 70,000 children picked up their pencil and exactly on the dot all started doing the IQ test. The reason they did that experiment was because, and we laugh at this now, but you know, this is why we shouldn't pick too much at what people believed in the past. They thought that the working classes of Scotland were having too many children and were diluting the nation's IQ. Nowadays, look at that, it's a shocking idea.
Yeah, we can't be doing experiments like that.
I'm not too critical of them, because they were operating with the best intentions and in the lights as they knew them. And what they knew, right? We can only regard it as reprehensible, 60, 70, 80 years down the road. What kind of a comparison is that? It's risible. Anyway, of course, they found out the working classes were more intelligent than everybody else. And then they boxed all these away, and Lawrence Whalley and Ian Deary found them. And then the light came on and they realised, where are all these people now? They're in their 70s.
Right.
And we've got a lifetime of their medical records, their health, their occupation, the food they ate, their social relationships, their occupation. We know everything about these people. Right? So we get them now and we test them on the same test that they had then. We'll look at how they've done and we can work out why. Fantastic.
That is fascinating.
The secret of brain power. And that study was called The Disconnected Mind, because what they proved was part of the reason mental skills get harder as you get older is because the fibers in the brain, the wiring of the radio, the circuits don't quite work. One of the big findings they found.
That's really
I'll just give you one very, very memorable finding that they gave. At aged 74, they found that all those who drank the most alcohol did the best on the tests.
Oh, cheers to that.
All the winos and the whiskey drinkers, your beer drinkers, they all did the best on the tests, which was And what do we do? Tell everybody to go out and get drunk? You know, that wasn't it. That wasn't it. What they found was that these people at 74, when they were 11, were highly intelligent, did well at school, got good jobs, and because they got good jobs and they got lots of money, they could afford to drink good quality wine and champagne and everything else. That didn't explain, and that wasn't the reason why they do well on the test. It was all the other decisions they would make. They could afford good clothes, they could live in warm houses, they could have nice holidays, they could eat a good diet, they'd got good family relationships, they had a purpose in life. All of these things, that's what maintained their brain health. Alcohol was a bystander. By the way, all those who would drink sodden, all the ones who are saturated in alcohol, they didn't do so well.
Got you. So fancy wine. Fancy wine as a luxury for brain and science, obviously. We'll come on to that later when we discuss your book. But let's just continue with your career a little bit more. So when did you end up coming back to Loughborough as a visiting professor?
During my time at Help the Aged, I was interested in some of the research that was going on in Loughborough on heat and cold. And I knew all the people in the human science department because that's what I'd done my master's degree. So I often found myself visiting Loughborough, talking to them and getting them to explain to me what they were finding and how that might be useful. Mm. And Keith Horgevorst, who was a professor in the School of Sports Science, Exercise and Health, just in passing one day said, James, look, why don't you ask for an academic position here? Right? You're the head of research in a big charity. Well, why don't? So I talked to Roger Haslam, right, who was the head of human sciences at that time. And he said, okay, James, he said, here's a form, fill it in. It was an application for an academic position. So I filled it all in. And I said, look, it's asking me for how many grants have I got. I can fill in how many grants I've given. He said, yeah. Well, that's it. So I said, but all these published references that you want. I said, I don't write peer-reviewed papers any longer. He said, in your case, James said, we're interested in who you know. So just write down the names of all the people you know. Like government ministers, like the heads of charities, like presidents of the Royal College, all this stuff, write all that down. So I wrote it all down, sent it in. And they all went deadly quiet. And I thought, oh, God, it's bounced. I'm going to get dumped yet again. And I got this letter coming through and it said, James, you've now got a chair in the university and you're a visiting professor.
Fabulous. Well, it just goes to show there's a common theme with you, isn't there, about bending the rules? I like it.
But that's what the university are interested in.
Yeah.
That's what they were interested in. So I got that academic position. Then I became director of research at Age UK, this bigger charity now. Then I became their chief scientist. And all the time I was interested in using research to improve life for ordinary older people and for all the organizations who have provided them with healthcare, with services, with products and with goods. All those wanted to know what science knew about older people and about aging and about the chemistry of the body and everything else and about the mind and about their social relationships and how they spent their money, just about everything. So I got to know lots of people and I got to understand how to use that research in order to make a difference.
So we've covered, that's quite a journey we've just covered in our conversation. Yeah. And talking of like making a difference and any other stories that you've got, what are some kind of like standout key moments for you? You know, whether it be field work or particular outcomes of projects. It'd just be good to hear from some of those kind of snapshots of the highs of your career.
One of them, when I was in Help the Aged, was giving evidence in front of a House of Lords Select Committee on Ageing, because this idea that the population was growing older had reached the minds of the people in Parliament, And they wanted to know what we knew, what does anybody know about how society is aging and where it's going and how we've got to plan for the future, better care homes, better hospitals, better roads, better services, everything. So they had a select committee look at it, and I gave evidence to them, and that was a marvelous experience. And I got to know people in the House of Lords. Just add those to the list. Why was I there? I was there because by doing well, I'd put myself into that Met Office conference, and by being at that conference, I'd met people. They hadn't done me a favour or given me a backhander or shoehorned me in. They just given me an opportunity. And I found myself in Help the Aged, and I found myself in the House of Lords giving this. That's how it works. That was a big high. Another big high was, I'm a scientist, and out of the blue, I got a letter from the Academy of Social Sciences. I'm a natural scientist, there's biology and physiology. And this letter said that the Council of the Academy of Social Sciences has recommended that you be appointed a Fellow of the Academy of Social Sciences for your work in improving society through science.
Wow, that's a compliment.
Yeah. Now, it's one thing if your mates say, well, you know, James has been around for a bit, you know, we'll give him a gold medal, or, you know, we'll make him a member of the Physiological Society or something. That's one thing. But when people outside your discipline who only know you by what you've done in the open say that to you, it's a massive, massive compliment. So that was another big high.
So we've covered highs. Have there been any career lows or particular struggles that you feel would be useful insight for people thinking of working
Megan,
in?
Let's create a story. You go on, Megan, to do a PhD, and you're into your first year. Right, you go on to do your PhD, and you're in your first year, and you're in your first year of collecting your data, and it's all stored on a computer. And you go out to lunch one day, and you come back, and your supervisor is at your desk, looking slightly worried, and then you find out he's crashed your computer and lost all your data.
Ooh, I think I'll be straight down the pub crying.
That happened to me.
Oh no, that's like nightmare fuel.
The ultimate nightmare. That I tell few people this, and I thought to myself, okay, this is where you need to draw on your strength of personality and don't get knocked over by it, right? And as you said, that was the first thing I did. Phoned a couple of mates, went down to the pub, had one too many, several too many as it happened. Right? That's what I did. And then picked myself up and got on with it. And I remember when my son was a little boy, he went to a general officer at his school at prize giving. You know, they're all given their books for doing well at school. And there was a general officer called Farrah Hockley. Farrah Hockley. Your listeners and readers need to find that book called The Edge of the Sword. He was the most brilliant man. He fought with the United Nations in Korea against the communist Chinese who'd invaded them. They captured him. They tortured him to the point of death till his heart stopped 5 times.
Wow.
Right? He led his men. He led his men in captivity and he kept their stuff together, right? And my little boy, when he was 8, 9, said, Daddy, I'm going to ask him a question. What shall I ask? And I said, you're a clever little boy. You ask him your own questions, son. So he went over and he said to Farrah Hockley, what did you learn at school to help you when you joined the army? And he said, never ever feel sorry for yourself. Just get on with it and lead others. And that was the man who'd been captured, fought, and been captured and tortured till his heart stopped 5 times. And he said, never ever feel sorry for yourself. Just get on with it and lead others. So I thought, just get on with it.
Yeah.
Get back down. And so I recollected all that, recollected it all, and look, all's well that ends well. I'm now best friends with my supervisor. You know, don't fall out with people because they make mistakes.
Yeah, we're just human. Yeah. These things happen.
I mean, I was pretty hateful at the time.
Yeah, I bet. We're over it now.
We're over it now.
Sure.
Yeah. So that was a really big low. I think that's probably one of the biggest setbacks I had. But also, don't be discouraged. I applied for a number of positions in universities and didn't get them. And that's the usual case, 100 applications, 10 interviews, 1 job. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Don't be deterred because you fail.
So we're back now, just got a refill. So let's get into the second half of the questions. So first of all, you're a visiting professor at Loughborough University, and I think you're actually the first visiting professor we've had on this show. So could you explain to listeners what that title means, please?
Yes. A visiting professor is granted by the university to individuals who have got valuable expertise or valuable experience outside the walls of the university to add benefits to what the university does. And you have to have a high record of achievement outside the university and be academically credible. Well, I had a first degree, a master's degree, a PhD. I was fellow of the Academy of Social Sciences. And I was the head of research at one of Britain's largest charities. And I understood the research area which was being carried out at the university, which was of relevance to me, and I knew the people there. So that all worked in my favour. There's a condition to being appointed as a visiting professor, and that is that you always have to have some ongoing work in the university. It isn't something nice that you put on top of your letterhead or as a title to your name and then do nothing for it. So no such thing as a free lunch. So I'm required to provide benefits or added value to some of the activities going on in the university.
So you're attached to the School of Design, if I'm right in thinking. So what
Yes.
ongoing research have you got with that school?
I work with Professor George Havener, who is the director of the Ergonomic and Environmental Research Centre, which is all about environmental design, heat, cold, ergonomics, sound, light, human interaction. All this work gets carried out in George's department. So that's who I work with. And there I'm an advisor on a big European project in which he's involved. It's called Heat Shield. It's worth 7 million euros. It has 20 organizations from 11 countries in Europe. And
Okay.
Heat Shield it's all about how do we protect the economy and the workforce of Europe, including Britain, from the effects of climate change, particularly increasing temperatures and hot weather, things like droughts and heat waves. That's what it's all about. My role there is to help them to take their research findings and to make a difference. Because European research money now comes with a condition, and that condition is that your research findings benefit society or the economy in Europe. So that's how I contribute to that project. Well, one good example is the construction of the new nuclear power plant in Somerset, Hinkley Point C. Their working conditions are very pressurized with very hot environments, and particularly in the summer, they have to monitor the conditions in which people work. Well, they really wanted to know how we could keep the risks down, and I helped to form that relationship so that those findings could make a difference.
So impact is a word that has kept cropping up in our discussion. So could you tell us a bit more about some of your either current or previous research that's had a real impact? And if you can identify one which you would say you're proudest of, that would be great.
The findings from my PhD led to postdoc work, and that was around understanding how older people are affected by cold temperatures in the winter. Do they go out more, or do they stay in more? Do they regulate their house temperature properly? And if not, why not? What clothing do they wear? What's the effect of cold temperatures on their cardiovascular system? And I used that and postdoc work when I got to Help the Aged to change the government's response and policy towards older people in the winter. So one big change was everyone mistakenly believed from the 1960s onwards, I think it was 1964, that old people died from the cold indoors, resulting in hypothermia, a lowered body temperature. That is not the case.
Okay.
The case is that the majority of people die from cold-produced blood clots called embolisms, which produce either a thrombotic stroke, a stroke in the head caused by a blood clot, or in the heart. That's what most people die of because of cold in the winter. So we changed government policy, so it switched from hypothermia to a policy of letting people understand that it's hearts and brains that get affected in the winter. And we also talked to people who were involved in insulating people's homes so they can have warm homes. The fact is that it's your total cold exposure in the winter that produces ill effects. And my research found that it was as much going out into the cold for brief periods, right, as it was having a cold home. In fact, you can have a warm home and go outside for half an hour or an hour, and you're as much at risk of a stroke or a heart attack then as if you'd stayed in your home.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah, I never knew that.
Yeah.
Wow, so
going out, I may have said that wrong, but going out into the cold can undermine the effects of a warm home.
Mm-hmm.
So you can have a warm home, you think you're fine, you're dressed inadequately, your activity levels are too low, you get cold air in the face or on the back of the hands, and as a result of that, while you're outside, your blood pressure goes up. When you come back in, if you're a younger person, your blood pressure goes back down again. An older person, it doesn't, it stays up.
Wow.
It stays up. So your body is reacting in your warm home just as if you were still outside in the cold. Ergo, lots of strokes and heart attacks in older people in home. And that changed government policy and their insulation requirements and the advice that older people were getting. And it went out through all of Help the Age's branches, if you like, and Age Your Case.
That's amazing, because that's really life-saving work, isn't it? You could have saved lives without realising it.
It is.
Really good advice.
Yeah, very difficult to quantify, except we know that over the last 60 years, excess winter deaths has fallen like that. There are many reasons for that, but understanding and changing your behaviour and having better homes and better insulation and getting better access to medical care in the winter has all contributed to that fall in excess winter death. So I'm pretty proud about it.
Yeah. So talking of things you should be proud of, let's talk about this. For those that are listening, I'm holding up James's new book called Supercharge Your Brain. Can you tell us a bit about the book then and the inspiration behind it? So when this podcast will be aired, this will already be published. So let's talk a bit more about what you advise in the book as being good for your brain. So some of the things that I've kind of made note of: chewing gum, alcohol, chocolate, sex. Yeah, so can you tell us just some of the kind of, I don't want to give too much away about the book.
Well, I'm sure your younger listeners, well, actually not your younger listeners, everybody's interested in why sex in the brain. Well, first of all, it's one of the most powerful physiological drives in the body. If you look at hunger, thirst, sleep, sex is up there with the best of them. It's a really powerful drive. It dominates. This drive to spread your DNA into the world is the key to evolutionary survival. It's embedded in there. You're not going to socialize away people's sex drives. Why is it there? Well, of course, for survival and reproductive purposes. But it turns out that sex rejuvenates the brain. They first found it in rats. Now, look, everybody's going to laugh at this, male, female, whatever, you're all going to laugh at this. They found that if you put a male rat in with a female rat for the very first time, the male, of course, will take the opportunity. Right? No male ever refused in the history of that experiment. No woman will be surprised at that. But the male did it every time, right? But he was stressed out. Stressed out. And the female was stressed out, but they still did it because of this drive.
Mm-hmm.
But when they found if they kept the male and the female together between 14 and 28 days, and they got used to each other, the stress subsided and it increased the number of new cells developing in the brain. And the older the rat got, the more the rejuvenation.
Oh.
So that's across your life. Right? This principle applies. Now, has it been found in people? Well, very difficult because you've got to get inside the brain in order to measure the cell production. But there are some clues to this. So they looked at Canadian female students, recorded what their frequency of sexual intercourse, and then measured their mental performance. And they found that those who are having the most sex did better on the mental tests. And they did tests better on tests of memory, which was the hippocampus, where in the rats, the new cells are developed. So there are some clues there. So it's a pretty fair bet, but it wasn't just the frequency of sex as a dose response. You know, the more sex you have, the more brain cells. It was the quality of the relationship. So frequent sex on its own isn't as good. I wouldn't say it won't do it. It isn't as good as that close relationship because there's stress involved. That is the reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now that leads on to social relationships generally. Loneliness is a natural human condition. It's the warning light on the dashboard. It's like hunger or thirst. It's the brain telling us we need to mix with people. Why? Because you can't unevolve what's evolved. The brain evolved to be social because it was key to survival. Humans on their own would never have survived to where we are now without the group. So that need for social interaction is in the brain. And when you're lonely, that's the warning light coming on saying, get some human company. And if you're lonely for a long period of time, right, that's exceptionally damaging to your general health and to your brain health. Mm. One study looked at people over the age of 60, and they got them to classify whether they thought they were lonely or not, and they measured them over 12 years. Megan, you know, as a budding scientist, 12-year experiment is a big deal. Mm. They did it over 12 years. They found that all those people over those 12 years who declared themselves to be habitually lonely had brain decline 20% more than everybody else.
Wowzers.
And in terms of your general health, protracted loneliness over a long period of time is as bad for your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day and drinking a bottle of vodka a day. Now, there are some people who do that, right? I wouldn't recommend it, but that's the level of risk of loneliness. The same with social isolation. We are social animals. No animal in the animal kingdom, no social animal does well when it's isolated. All of them go into massive decline. It stresses out the body. The pressure on the physiological systems of the body is enormous. Ill health results. So if you look at socially isolated people, they've got high blood pressure, they've got heart disease, they've got obesity, they've got poor mental responses, they become paranoid, they freeze, they don't like other people, they react badly, they don't get good at, the whole thing's a mess, right? So locking down people, as well as having benefits, has also got enormous health risks in the short term and in the long term. Well, so you need to maintain your social connections, however you do it. Social media, emails, phone calls, even letters, nice little thank you notes, talking to people at a distance. Even a University of Essex researcher found that you can alleviate loneliness just by saying hello to someone as you walk past them in the road. You're walking your dog, morning, evening, how are you? South of England, more difficult. North of England, brilliant, right? Hey up, how are you doing? Right? All that alleviates loneliness. If you're living on your own, meet friends, meet relatives, meet family. Right? You can live on your own and still do well.
Well, I think all of that's a great introduction and definitely a teaser for the book. I don't want to give too much away, but yeah, like I said, the book's out now, and we can make sure to pop links in where appropriate. So now that you've got the book, we've talked about your career and some of the things that you've achieved. Have you achieved everything you wanted to achieve, or have you still got end goals in mind that are driving you?
I'm still motivated to work.
Mm-hmm.
And at the moment, I'm director of the Brain Health Network in London. And their long-term aim is to have everybody thinking brain health. So, Megan, if I asked you or your mates, name me 5 things that you can do to look after your heart. Right?
Yeah.
You'd all go cholesterol, fats, being overweight, doing exercise. You'd know what they were, right? But if I said to you, how do you look after your brain? Because your brain is the most important organ of the body. Most people would go, do a brain game?
Yeah.
We wouldn't know. So that's one aim I want to achieve. I want it to become general knowledge. So yeah, I want to achieve this big ambition in society and think brain health. And I want my book to do well in the US. I'll feel better about myself and the book if it sells well. Can you imagine how many is it sold? Well, a couple of thousand, James, out of a population 360 million.
I'm sure it won't be a case at all, but we'll definitely touch base in the future and see if this dream has been achieved. So just some final questions for you now. What would you say is the most exciting part of being a professor of the physiology of aging?
For me, it's working with this vast range of exceptional, interesting, and I have to say, thousands of ordinary people I've met from all walks of life who are interested in what I do. That is so flattering. And it's so stimulating as well. And from the bottom to the top, everybody from, I talk to ordinary people at Age UK branches all over Britain, absolutely loved it. I'd go to the UN, I'd go to the World Health Organization, I'd go all these bigger places, I'd travel, I'd meet people. They're always, the person you sit next to on the plane, they're always interested in what you have to say. And if you're good at anything, it isn't being a professor. If you're good at anything and you're doing some good in the world, people will love you for it. And it can be in the public sector, you can be the best civil servants in the world and delivering public lavatories for everybody, you're making a difference. Mm-hmm. Or you can be in the private sector, you can be in the pop world, you can be in a group or a band, or you can be in fashion, right? That's the most important thing, is be productive and be helpful to other people. And don't just think of yourself. I often think these old-fashioned ideas, which I was brought up on, like, don't be selfish, work together as a team, look after your friends and family, understand duty, understand responsibility, be accountable for what you do, resign if you've made a horrendous mistake which has hurt and damaged people, don't hang on in your job. Sometimes I think all these values of, and then I see the work of charities, and I see people in volunteer groups, and I see people going into care homes, I see people helping each other, and I see young people helping older people. They haven't all gone.
Oh, that was such a lovely answer. I'm going to ask you a weird question now. So what's the weirdest thing you've had to do as part of your role?
I had to think about this, but on one of the WHO meetings I went to, it was one of 3. The first one, if you imagine Canada, the first one was in Vancouver, over here on the Pacific coast. The second one was in Halifax on the Atlantic coast. So the World Health Organization thought, well, we've got to be fair, haven't we? So we'll have the next one in the middle in February in Winnipeg, which even the Canadians called Winterpeg. And when I got there, it was minus 43 Celsius.
A bit cold. I have gloves.
The Canadians, in their infinite wisdom, and bless them, I love the Canadians, they put the taxi rank outside the terminal. And most people arrive there in groups. So they'd have 4 people in the group. One would go outside for 10 minutes. That was all they could stand. And then somebody else would keep their place in the taxi rank. I was on my own. So there I was in minus 43, shivering till I couldn't control it, with tears turning to icicles on my face, running outside, asking somebody to save my place, and then running back in again, and then running out and trying to find them so I could get into the queue again.
I bet they were like, who is this Englishman crying at the taxi rank?
Yeah, exactly, manic, going up and down. And the longer I missed my place in the queue, the more I had to do it, and the more often I was out in the car house. Just so weird. And eventually, somebody took mercy on me and said, get in our taxi.
Oh.
And we'll drop you off at a taxi rank in Winnipeg and they'll take you to your hotel. Somebody else will take you to your hotel.
The crying work then. Yeah. So apart from running around Canada crying, looking for a taxi, what does a professor of the physiology of aging do in their spare time? Have you got any fun hobbies?
Well, I'm very fortunate in living in one of the most beautiful parts of Britain, which is the southwest, in Devon. It's a natural paradise. It's got England's only remaining wilderness area, called Dartmoor, 400 square miles. It's almost like the plateau from the Lost World. It's 1,000 meters above sea level. It's 3,000 feet above sea level. And the foothills teem with wildlife. It's all hunting, shooting, fishing, farming, natural beauty. That's where I spend my free time, and it inspires me. Leonardo da Vinci, nature is the source of all true knowledge. So that's where I go. And then the other one is, well, I used to walk my 2 Rottweilers. With 18 months, they got to about 11 years of age, and they died, the 2 of them, which was hugely upsetting. But now I've got a beautiful Rottweiler puppy, and you and I have talked about her, Megan, and about your dogs as well. And I take huge delight in my little Rottweiler puppy, who's a little tearaway. And when we bought her from somewhere near Leicester, from Kettering, we bought her from a breeder there. Do you know? And I often thought, little Nettie gets lonely. She's the only dog in the house. She's got a human life, but she hasn't got a doggy life. A few days ago, the breeder phoned me and said, I've got 1 doggy left, and it's Nettie's brother, Arthur. Will you have him? Yes.
It's happening. I didn't realise this had progressed. I knew you were thinking about it, but that's so exciting.
Yeah, so Arthur is due to turn up in the next couple of weeks.
Oh, wonderful.
Little Nettie doesn't know what. Now they'll be able to tear around the garden instead of her just tearing around the house being bored.
Wear each other out.
Wear each other. Now, you know that, Meg, because I know that you have 2 dogs and they have a doggy life, and it's a completely different thing altogether.
Oh, lovely. Well, I'm glad to hear you get to the second one. So, final question for you. What do you think is going to be the next kind of hot topics for students moving into similar areas to you? And do you have any words of wisdom for students?
Okay. Neuroscience in particular is developing so fast. I think there are going to be some frightening areas of research that are going to take some very wise people to sort them out. So already scientists have grown brain cells in little patches about that size, about the size of a penny, 2 millimeters across, which as they grow, develop their own organization. It's as if the brain cells have got a mind of their own, and they develop mini brains. And those mini brains, can they think? Are they conscious? Are they trapped in some never-ending world of pain or happiness, or that they can do nothing about? Right? Now, that's serious stuff. It's got to be watched. You've already got Elon Musk wiring up the brain to a computer And his aim, if you can wire up to a computer, you can Bluetooth it. That's for all the young people amongst you. You all enjoy Bluetooth. You got to be careful, because some neuroscientist is going to Bluetooth your brain one day, and we need to get the ethics sorted out. We need to get responsible, accountable science. Mm-hmm. Scientists, it's either Yale or Harvard, and either of the universities will go mad if I can't remember, but they have maintained the life of a pig brain after the pig has died.
Okay.
Now, they have done it in such a way that they block the cells talking to each other. You, Megan, will know about the ionic distribution of electrolytes on either side of the membrane. Well, you've got to stop that electron flow across the membrane, and they've got electron blockers to stop that. But they've kept the brains of the pigs, the cells, alive for a long time after the pigs died. Now, you think to myself, somebody somewhere, look, this is the good ethical American science, right? But somebody somewhere in the world, a scrupulous person, is going to do that, not just to a pig brain, but to a human brain. Mm-hmm. Right? Now, it's exciting, and the prospects for curing brain disease. No, there's no cure for any neurological condition, hundreds of them, and there's no cure for any of them so far. Right? But the prospects of getting a cure for those, cure Parkinson's, cure Alzheimer's, cure Huntington's chorea, solve a stroke. All this is what we need, right? But at the same time, you've got these massive ethical problems in neuroscience that we've got to look after. I've no doubt in my own mind that science advances faster than ethics. So the neuroscientists have got to get together with the philosophers to sort this out. Mm-hmm. What are the rules for the game? Who are we accountable to? Who can make sure that nobody's making a buck out of this? Who can be sure that nobody's weaponizing our brains, right? These are huge and exciting problems. You probably need a neuroscientist on here and a philosopher together for them to start talking about it.
That would be an interesting discussion.
Yeah, and we don't understand most of the brain, no matter what a neuroscientist tells you, right? We don't understand most of the brain. We can't even categorically state how the chemistry turns into an idea, or how you get a thought, or what consciousness is. We know that no one's ever found consciousness without a working brain. It's never been found. You've never found consciousness without that. Now, that should be enough to excite people who want to get to grips with this. I would also say, you might not want to be a scientist, but remain interested in science and get yourself to the position where you understand it. Because if you don't, you'll be at a disadvantage all your life on your health decisions, on your understanding of the health service, of medical procedures. All this stuff depends on, you'll be a better patient if you understand more science. Read The New Scientist. You may not become a professor or a PhD, but keep up with it. Keep up with it and understand it. And in helping yourself, you'll help others around you.
Fabulous. I think that's some great words of wisdom to end the podcast on. Before we go, James, is there anything you wish to plug or mention? Twitter, maybe a book, I don't know.
I don't want to appear self-centered, but it's a real achievement to write a book. And it's an even bigger achievement if people buy it. And the director of the Brain Health Council in Washington, D.C. Said about my book, she said, this is where storytelling becomes brain health. And it's full of art. It's full of fine art. It's full of Picasso. It's full of sculpture. So don't think that if you buy the book, you're going to be overwhelmed by science. I've tried to make it interesting, and if you can bring yourself to get a copy, you'd help me and you'd help you.
Fabulous. Well, that's a lovely way to sign off. Thank you so much for joining us today on Cuppa with a Scientist. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Thank you.
All right. Me too. A pleasure also. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all for listening or watching this episode of Cuppa with a Scientist. I hope you found it interesting and will join us again. Do leave a comment and get in touch. I'd love to hear your feedback and thoughts on who you'd like to see on the show next. And make sure you don't miss a show by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other mainstream podcast platforms. You can also subscribe to the Loughborough University YouTube channel if you prefer to watch the show. See you next time for more hot tea and even hotter stories to help you on your way to becoming a scientist.